When people think about edgy comedy, I think they get the concept entirely backwards. Because what we associate with edgy comedy and edginess is edgelords, right? We think about 9/11 jokes, Holocaust jokes, dead baby jokes, all that type of stuff. But that, I would argue, that is the norm now. That's what my generation grew up with. We grew up with 4chan, we grew up with the internet, we grew up hearing 9/11 jokes since we were children. It's not edgy anymore, right? That whole brand of comedy has become extremely normal. I live in Austin, Texas, which is kind of the edgelord home. It's the hive of scum and villainy, right? It's the dark heart of the swarm. This is where edginess lives. Fewer people have seen as much bad comedy as I have over the last decade, because most people have done comedy as long as me either quit or are more successful. So I'm right in the middle of being able to see a lot of bad comedy. So I feel like an authority on this topic, all right? And edginess is interesting to me, because people get it totally wrong. And by definition, because those jokes are so normal, they're no longer edgy. Edginess means you have an edge. You push against something. You're pushing against the culture, right? You're being transgressive. You're being counter-culture. Because that's the culture now, it's completely normal to make those jokes. The jokes are no longer counterculture. Because Kill Tony is the biggest comedy show, it's kind of dictated the landscape of comedy. If you're doing jokes that align with the sensibilities of that show, then you're not being edgy. If you're doing jokes that align with our overculture, then you're not being edgy. Not only did we grow up with Holocaust jokes or whatever, pretty much flagrant open anti-Semitism is normal now. Go to the comment section on any website and it's just, you know what I mean? So people making those types of jokes who think they're being edgy are doing quite the opposite. They're being normative. They're enforcing a norm without really realizing it. You're in the big group, you're saying this is the way you should be. There's a lot of examples of this. It could be more benign, right? It could be kind of like plain everyday things. Like, let's say a Nate Bargatze. He has a joke that's like, I go to the coffee shop and they ask me what kind of coffee I want. I'm just like, I want a regular old coffee. And I want to, you know, he's saying he's one of the normal guys. He's average Joe, regular American. He just wants black coffee. He doesn't know the words to order that other type of coffee that the hipsters over here order. So that's normative in a very harmless way. But then you have a little less benign. Let's say the military flyovers of an NFL game. What they're doing is they're packaging a couple symbols together, right? You have football, you have the American flag, and you have a plane representing our military. So it's saying to be American is to support the military and to like football. If you like football, you should accept these other two things together as well as one thing, rather than being like, I like football, but I think our military budget is a little bloated, as you probably should think. You're supposed to just kind of implicitly accept those things. That's why they pay that money. They're pushing the norm. They're being normative about what it means to be an American. Does comedy do things on that level? No, but still insidious kind of normative messages can definitely slip in. And I think this happens, ironically, exactly when people think they're being edgy. Making homeless jokes is extremely normal. Everyone just kind of says what an eyesore homeless people are and that they should get rid of them, or they joke about killing them or whatever, right? And they think they're being edgy when they're saying that, but they're enforcing the dominant culture. We live in a culture that does not care for homeless people. There's not really empathy in our culture. So by making jokes like that, you're actually being normative. You're enforcing the dominant culture while thinking you're being edgy, which is super, super annoying. So in that regard, being edgy is kind of a moving target. It is culturally situated. It's bound to the time and place that you live in. Taking 9/11 jokes again, making a 9/11 joke here, completely normal. Doing it in Saudi Arabia, less normal, okay? Even a lot of jokes that you can get away with all around the country, you go to Portland or Brooklyn, not the case. So that brings up the question, what do I think is actually edgy still? And I have a couple examples. The first example is from the late great Norm Macdonald. He had a joke talking about eating meat. So he makes fun of himself by saying, when people have like an argument about eating meat, the other side makes all these great points. They say, well, you shouldn't do it, factory farming's terrible, and there's no reason we have to kill them, and you can survive without eating meat, and have all these great arguments. And then he goes, my argument is I like pork. Wonderful joke. Succinct, summarizes the issue perfectly. And he's able to pull it off because he eats meat, so he's able to say that without being sanctimonious or preachy. He's able to bring to the surface this internalized contradiction in our culture. We all eat meat even though we think factory farming is pretty messed up. It's very hard to pull off that type of joke, and he's able to do it because he's able to point at himself as the dominant cultural force.
Of course she's right, and I'm wrong.
I would say even this joke is extremely like empathetic and it kind of has a lot of heart to it. That's what edginess is right now. He's able to push against the culture and be transgressive without pandering, important, without pandering, and most importantly, while being funny, right? This culturally situated idea of being edgy has those three criteria in stand-up comedy.
Some days better than others, yeah, I agree. Other days I forget I'm lucky I can breathe.
Another example that I think passes with flying colors is from Louis C.K., where he talks about friend's cousin visiting from out of town, comes into New York City to Grand Central Station, which is like homeless ground zero.
And we passed this homeless guy and she sees him. I mean, we all passed him, but she saw him. She's the only one who actually saw him. We didn't, me and her cousin were like, so he's supposed to be there. So there's a perfectly good reason why that's not me and it's him. It's all the right people always win, I'm sure of it.
He finds himself like pushing her off and then realizes he's correcting her for doing the right thing.
So she's down there, sir, can we call someone? And me and my friend, we're from New York, this is the crazy part. We immediately go to her, oh, no, honey, don't, We start correcting her behavior like she's doing something wrong.
Very funny joke, and again, it works for the same reason the Norm joke works, is because he's pointing the finger at himself and saying, all of us know homelessness is a horrible problem, but we all do nothing about it.
She's like, why, is he okay? No, he needs you desperately. That's not the point. We just don't do that here.
Who knows if that story really happened to him, or if he created it because he realized that first. It doesn't really matter, right? Another edgy joke, because it pushes against culture by being transgressive, going against the grain because we treat homeless people like shit. It is not pandering, and it's hilarious. So, fits the three criteria. I think there's a million examples of this. It doesn't all have to be like these like empathetic kind of jokes. It could even be about issues that a lot of people try to be edgy about. Like, you know, let's say people talk about trans stuff. Most people miss the mark on this, obviously. People make very boring jokes that are kind of all have the same message, which is biological sex is everything and gender identity is meaningless. That's the message underneath their joke. So whatever their joke is, they're kind of being normative in that regard. Whether the joke's good or bad is not edgy, right? An example of this, I think, comes from Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, one of the greatest comedians ever, one of the funniest guys ever. In a lot of his last specials, a lot of trans jokes. I would say misses the mark on being edgy. He thinks he's being edgy, he thinks he's saying something really insightful, but really, as other people have pointed out before, he just has the average opinion of a middle-aged black guy. He just is a middle-aged black guy with middle-aged black guy opinions. It just so happens he's one of the funniest people ever, so he makes it funny, right? But it's not because this great insight he has. He just is funny, so he pulls it off. And I like a lot of those jokes, but I just don't think he's being edgy in the way he thinks he is. Because he's just saying something that is supporting the norm in our culture. He's not really going into any real nuance in a special way and making it funny. He's just kind of saying that normal point and making that normal point everybody agrees with in the normal, you know, in the overculture, funny. So it doesn't meet that criteria. You could argue maybe it's slightly pandering, I don't think necessarily, but I would say not transgressive, not pandering, and funny. So 2 out of 3, but it doesn't meet the criteria. That's what's interesting to me, is the fact that this is a moving target, right? A lot of jokes that may have been edgy 5 or 6 years ago with the trans stuff aren't edgy anymore because the culture has moved. A lot of jokes that are edgy here aren't edgy on the other side of the world. So it moves in time and space, which is really cool to me. I do a lot of jokes that people think might normally define as edgy, like dark humor and like explicit jokes. Because that's just where my sensibilities lie. I'm not like trying to be edgy. I just, you know, I worked in the psychiatric emergency room for a couple of years. I worked in clinical psychiatry, you know, think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest type places. You could work with a 65-year-old nurse and she'll make some jokes that are like, oh my God, like, Jesus, lady. You know, it'll shock even me. Because she's seen death for 45 years every week of her life. So turns out words don't bother her that much, right? So they call that gallows humor. And that's more where I live. That's what I find funny. But I don't think those jokes are edgy. The joke I have that I do think is edgy is I went to Vietnam recently and they had a dog restaurant there. Like a restaurant where you eat dogs. In the same way we have like seafood restaurants. People do not like these. I have like 5 minutes of jokes on this. People don't like them. I haven't been able to thread that needle yet, right? I'm trying to bring to light a contradiction, which is that people are totally okay eating cows and pigs, yet they think it's barbaric to eat dogs. And I think you gotta have one or the other. You gotta think it's awful, or you gotta be okay eating dogs. I could be having the best set of my life. The crowd could love me. They could be like a dirty crowd who's okay with everything, drunk and rowdy. And as soon as I bring up eating dogs, it's like, slam the brakes, get off at Bombville, right? I would love to be able to make that joke work for the same reason that Norm and Louie are, right? But I'm not able to thread that needle quite yet. I'm hitting 2 out of 3 in a different regard, right? It's transgressive, it's not really pandering, because people who are vegetarians don't like that either, because they're talking about eating dogs. So transgressive, not pandering, but it's not funny yet. So hopefully one day I can get that stuff to work for everybody and have what I think is a truly edgy joke.
To die by your side is such a heavenly way to die.
You can be edgy in a lot of different regards, I think. You know, tell me in the comments if you have any great examples for maybe lesser known comics, especially, of like really great jokes that meet all 3 of these criteria. But I think you can be edgy in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be subject matter. It could even be through your performance. Because comedy is, if you look at 9 out of 10 comics, or more like 99 out of 100 comics, all kind of do comedy in the same way, and that's myself included, which we're all standing on the stage and to one level or another, just speaking to a microphone. Whether people do act outs, sit on a stool, it's immaterial. It's all kind of, it's within that like vernacular of comedy. That's what everybody expects for comedy. So I think when somebody does something very strange in their performance, I think that is edgy, because the culture is to be cool on stage. And so if you're willing to put yourself out there in a way that is so weird and off-putting, Casey Rocket, very funny.
Whoa! Heaven let the light shine down.
Zach Zucker of Stamptown is very funny. And both are doing these over-the-top kind of performances, and they do so well, I think, because people have a hunger. People are tired of everybody trying to be cool all the time. It's like, you're a clown, go be a clown. And so to actually go on stage and be a clown, maybe literally, but figuratively, is edgy right now. But that's why I found it so interesting, is I think a lot of people being edgy are not. And in fact, are doing the exact opposite. On the other side of the spectrum is people who pander, right? People who think they're being edgy in counterculture, but they end up pandering to another in-group. You know, the best example of this would be like Orange Man Bad comedy when Trump got elected, you know, kind of Daily Show type stuff, which is they're pushing against the dominant culture at the time, but they were just like pandering to like liberal Democrats or whatever. So that's not really edgy, it's just being normative to a different group. And a lot of people who try that type of comedy, who are like trying to be empathetic and talk about homeless issues or trans issues, they don't end up being funny, or they end up being like overly weepy and sentimental. So I greatly admire people who are able to hit all these at once, because not only is it a moving target, it's a really narrow one. So when people hit the bullseye, I respect it. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did I totally miss the mark on this definition of painting edginess versus normative? You have any great examples? Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Nikolai Roska. Thank you.